When I was a teenager, I was infatuated with being on the phone. If there was a girl that I liked, I would spend hours on the phone with her. Now, the problem was this was before there were cell phones. So we actually had these things called landlines, a phone attached to the wall with a short cord. And this meant that my parents could hear what I was saying. But when we got a cordless phone, it made talking for hours so much easier because I could take that phone to any room in the house because of how mobile it was. Now, it was a vastly superior method to talking on the phone than was the landline. As we look at this idea of the new covenant in Hebrews 8, we're going to see how the results of this new covenant are much more like a cordless phone than a landline, and as a result, why it is so superior. So I'm going to read from Hebrews 8. I'm going to read just verses 8 and 9. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they did not remain faithful to my covenant, and I turned away from them. Now, if you happen to be in church yesterday, you probably heard one of us say right before communion, this is my body given for you. And then after supper, Jesus took the cup and said, this is the new covenant of my blood shed for you. Do this in remembrance of me. So these words spoken by Jesus, followed by his death, is what ushered in this new covenant. So what does this mean for us? In John 1:14, we hear the words that the Word, Jesus, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. That word dwelling is literally the word tabernacle, which is where God's presence dwelt in the Old Testament. So in other words, Jesus was now the meeting place between God and people. And as amazing as it was to have Jesus' physical presence here on earth, the limitation was that he was in one place at one time. But just prior to Jesus laying down his life, he told his disciples, it is to their advantage that he go away because he would send the Holy Spirit who would be with them, with us forever. And this meant that God's presence would now indwell every single Christ follower through his Spirit, and that would make us living temples. So this is a complete game changer, to say the least. Rather than God's presence being something that was in one location that people had to come to, right? God's presence was now unleashed in all Christ followers, by which we would go to others. So rather than a stationary landline that people had to come to in order to experience God's presence, we are roaming cordless phones that go to others so they can experience God's presence. That's exactly why Peter says that we are a royal priesthood. But we are not priests in a stationary temple, but a mobile one, our bodies. Since Jesus offered up the ultimate sacrifice, we no longer offer up the same types of sacrifices the priests of old did. Rather, as his mobile temples, we go to others, offering the sacrifice of praise. So I'll leave you this question. What would it look like to take the very presence of God to someone, as opposed to waiting for them to come to you?